In this video, we are going to have a look at the top 10 conditional access policies that you should have in your Microsoft 365 tenant. Now, this is not going to cover Intune related conditional access policies. This is just going to be purely identity based or Entra ID based conditional access policies. So we won't be talking about securing devices which are enrolled into Intune, make sure that they are compliant, none of those businesses. I'll go through the Intune related conditional access policies in a different video. So if you're new to the channel, my name is Rajit and I work as a Microsoft cloud consultant in the UK, and I run a consultancy company. And I've been doing that since 2010. So being consulting for large and small clients for the last 14 years. I do publish videos on a daily basis around Microsoft 365, Intune, and Azure. So if those topics are of any interest to you, please do consider subscribing to the channel and also watch the other videos that I have in the channel. All right, let's get started. So the first conditional access policy that we have is the obvious one. So we are going to protect the administrative accounts. So for that, we want to have MFA for all our admin accounts. So for that, let's just go into the Entra portal. So entra.microsoft.com. Let's just go into the left-hand pane, expand the protection section that we have on the left-hand side, and click on conditional access. Now, this is where we create all the conditional access policies that we need in the organization. But sometimes when you have a tenant being provisioned out of the box and you haven't made any changes, something called security defaults is enabled by Microsoft. So that is a set of basic policies that Microsoft prefers to have the tenant to be in a somewhat secure state. So that is called security defaults. So you can't have security defaults and conditional access policies at the same time. Now, let's go and disable security defaults. So for that, we go into the identity section on the left-hand pane and click on Overview. This is where you get the information regarding your tenant. And from a licensing perspective for conditional access policies, we need a minimum of Microsoft Entra ID P1. So if you have a business premium SKU, this will be covered. Or if you have an E3 SKU or an E5, so M63, M365 E3 or M365 E5 or Office 365 E3, E5 variations, you should be good to go. Or you can have a separate license for conditional access policies for the Entra ID P1. So if you have a separate license for that, you can use that as well. But that might be slightly expensive. But anyway, so let's click on Properties. And if you come all the way down, this is where you enable or disable security defaults. So you click on Manage Security Defaults, and it is currently enabled. So we need to disable that because we are going to use conditional access policies. So let's just use the drop-down menu and click on Disabled. And Microsoft is asking for a reason, so we could say we have a conditional access policy, so we are going to use conditional access policies. So my organization is planning to use conditional access. So this replaces security defaults, and we are going to use the specific conditional access policies tailored for our organization. So let's click on Save. So this kind of disables the security default. Give it a couple of minutes for the Microsoft backend to replicate and update the information so that we can start using conditional access policies. Because if the security defaults are turned on, and if you try and create a conditional access policy, it will warn you that you need to disable security defaults first before you can go ahead with the CA policies. So, you have the warning anyway. So now that we have disabled our conditional access policies, it says over here. So let's just go back once again, just to make sure, click on Properties and scroll all the way down, and it says security defaults are not turned on. So it says your organization is currently using conditional access policies, which prevents you from enabling security defaults. So that's fine. So that's exactly what we want. So now let's start creating conditional access policies. So the first one that we need is to protect all sensitive accounts, all the admin accounts that we need, like global administrators, Exchange admins, SharePoint admins. So for that, let's just use the left-hand pane and let's expand Protection tab and click on Conditional Access. Now, there are two ways of creating conditional access, or basically three ways. So one is to create a policy from scratch, in which you're defining all the parameters and the conditions yourself. Or you have some policies from Microsoft which are pre-created, which are called templates. So the MFA for administrative accounts are covered by the template, so we can easily use that. So let's click on that policy over there. And the first one that we have within Secure Foundation is require multi-factor authentication for admins. That is exactly what we want as policy number one. Now, let's click on Review and Create. Now, over here, it will tell you what we are trying to do. So it gives you a pre-filled name for the policy. So require MFA for admins. I like to put in some naming convention around it, say CAP, Conditional Access Policy, number 1, for example. Now, you could stick with the name that is given by Microsoft, or you can tweak it depending upon the naming convention that you have within your organization. So it is always best to go with conditional access policies in a report-only mode first. So there are 2 rules when you create a conditional access policy. Stick with report-only mode first to analyze the impact in your organization. And the second one is you need to exclude at least one global admin account or privileged account from the conditional access policies. So this way, if at all you configure a conditional access policy in the wrong manner and you kind of apply something globally, you are not locked out to revert the changes. All right, so we are going for report-only mode, and here it pre-fills all the information that we need. That is the beauty of having a template. So here we are excluding the current user, and whenever you create a policy from a template, it always excludes the current user. So you don't have that issue of always remembering that I need to exclude the global admins or a sensitive user account. So it is excluding the current account, and now the included roles are all the sensitive ones, as we have said. So the global admins, security admins, SharePoint admins, Exchange administrator. So all of those ones are included in the policy, sorry. And we are saying all cloud apps. So we are including all the cloud apps for all these sensitive users to come under the scope of MFA. And we say at the end, grant access, but we need multi-factor authentication. So here we are saying all these sensitive users are allowed to access any portals within Microsoft 365 and all applications, provided that an MFA is satisfied. So that's the policy that we are trying to create. So let's click on Create option, and let's just wait for the policy to be created. So if we go back onto the left-hand pane within the middle section and click on Policies, you can see that we have the Conditional Access Policy 1 being created. So CAP 1. So that's been created. Now, as you can see above, we have a few policies that's been created, and it says with a tag Microsoft Managed. I will come to that later on towards the end of the video. So there is another way by which you can pre-create a few conditional access policies with a few clicks. So I'll come to that towards the end of the video. So let's go ahead with creating the second conditional access policy. So the next policy that we need is blocking device code flow authentications. So this is where you have a managed device maybe, or you have some sort of a device in which you need to have the authentication through the browser. So you are using a command line, for example. You say, okay, connect-mggraph-device code flow parameter, and it prompts you to open up a browser. You can open up that browser in any other machine, and you get a code in the command prompt, and you enter the command, that particular code in the browser, and that lets you authenticate the session. So you can have these two happening separately. You don't have to have it on the same machine. So you could have the command line running from a machine when which you don't have access at the moment, or maybe you do, but you can have the browser when which you authenticate the session on a different machine, completely separate. So we need to block those kind of authentication flows, because that is a security risk in most of the companies. And this is a policy that I haven't seen implemented in many companies, because I do consult with smaller, medium, and even large corporations in the UK. So this is something very rarely being implemented, but let's just do that so that we are in a much more better state, conditional access policy wise. So let's click on New Policy, because we don't have it as part of the template. So let's just give an example, CAP 2, for example, and let's just say block device code flow. And let's click on all users. So we don't want to exclude anything. We don't want device code flow to be excluded for any users when you start setting up the conditional access policy. If you do have a valid use case in which few of the managed machines, maybe kiosk devices, any of those kind of scenarios comes into play in which you do need device code flows, you can exclude that by coming over here. But let's just target all the users. And in the target resources, we are just going to select cloud apps and all cloud applications. So we are targeting all the applications. So we don't want device code flow for any applications within the cloud. Now for networks, we don't want to segregate the network for this one. We want it to be applied no matter whether they are accessing it from within the organization or outside the organization or any trusted locations. So we're not configuring the network side of things for this one. And within conditions, the one that we are looking for is authentication flow. So it is a preview feature. but you can still go ahead and configure it and make sure that the device code flow doesn't happen in your organization. So here we are enabling authentication flows, and you have two of them. So this is what we are targeting, the device code flow. So let's check that one. Authentication transfer is an option in which you're transferring the authentication from one machine to a different one. So for example, maybe you have something going on in your machine, maybe you have a QR code in which you can use your mobile phone and authenticate. So you're kind of transferring the authentication that has already happened within the machine onto a mobile device. If that is something that you want to block, let's just go ahead and do that. That is not something that is being used in most of the organization, if not, all the organizations. So let's just block that from the get-go so that you're in a much more better state. And if there is a need for that, you can always come back and tweak the policy. So let's just say authentication flow has been configured, and we are using the save button. Let's click on save. And over here, we are saying grant access. Within the grant controls, we are saying block access. So we are blocking all device code flow authentications, irrespective of which network it comes from. And we are targeting all the users, targeting all the cloud applications, and we are going for report-only mode in this case, but you can always go ahead and turn it on. I don't think there is an organization in which it is going to have an impact, but you do have to kind of access all the sign-in logs that you have and make a choice for yourself as to whether you have anything going on within your company. Now here it always says exclude the current user. We could do that, and let's just click on create to create the second conditional access policy. So blocking device code flow. Now third one is about blocking legacy authentication flows. So this is about POP, IMAP, SMTP kind of protocols, which we don't want to be open within our tenant. Again, Microsoft has made a good security posture in the sense that if you have any new tenant, the legacy authentication flows are disabled by default, but let's just go ahead and disable that anyway. So you click on new policy from a template, and we go ahead with the third one, which says block legacy authentication. And let's click on review and create, and we are going with CAP3. We can stick with the same name, report only mode. We are including all the users. We are excluding the current user. We possibly could bring in the current user as well into the included scope. We are targeting all the cloud applications, and these are the two legacy authentication clients. So the Exchange ActiveSync client and other clients. So this is what we are targeting by using this particular policy. And we are saying we are selecting block access. And let's click on create. Wait for it to load. So we have 3 policies being created. The next one that we need is again related to multi-factor authentication. So since we have already brought all the administrator accounts under the MFA scope, let's just go ahead and do the same for all user accounts that we have. So let's again go ahead and click on new policy from template. And let's just check whether we have something for user accounts. Let's just say users. There you go, require multi-factor authentication for all users. Let's click on review and create. Now we're going ahead with CAP4, I believe. Report only mode. We are including all the users, excluding the current account, targeting all the applications, and we are saying we are happy to grant access for all the user accounts, provided that the multi-factor authentication is satisfied. Let's click on create to create the policy. So 4 of them has been created. Let's just quickly refresh. Yes, it's the 4 conditional access policies that we have. Now, while we are on the MFA pane, let's just configure MFA for all guest accounts and external identities as well. And again, this is something that is not very frequently seen within companies, but let's just take care of that. So let's go ahead and say, click on new policy, and we say CAP5, require MFA for all guest accounts, all guest. And we're saying users, and we say select all users and groups, and we select guest or external accounts or external users. We could select all of those, B2Bs, local guest users. Let's just select all of them. And we are targeting the resources. We are targeting all of them. We don't really mind which network they come from. And we go for none of these options apply at the moment because we don't want to filter based on the type of the devices they use or the locations. So let's just go ahead with the controls, the access controls, and let's just say we are happy to grant access, but they need to have multi-factor authentication enabled. and satisfied. So let's go ahead. It's in report only mode. Let's click on select and let's click on create to create the conditional access policy. So we have 5 of them. We have 5 more to go. So conditional access policy number 6 that we need within any tenant is about blocking access to the Microsoft 365 tenant from non-approved locations. To understand this better, what we are trying to do over here is blocking access to the tenant from any locations in which our organization doesn't have a presence. So for example, if you are a small company based in the UK and all the user base that we have is within the UK, we don't want to have access to the Microsoft 365 tenant from any locations outside that particular country. Whereas if you are a medium-sized organization in which you have a few satellite offices around Europe, you could pick and choose the countries in which you have a presence, and you can say only allow connections from those locations. You can always trust the office locations that you have around the world. That is a different scenario in which you're saying, these are the list of my public IP addresses, and those locations are trusted. So for this particular policy, we need to create something called named locations first. So in order to do that, let's just go into the middle pane, and on the left-hand side, we have the option that says named location. So this is where we define the trusted locations, our own office locations or maybe country in which we are operating, and we want to block anything outside that particular scope. So let's click on country. The first option that we have, country's location, and we can say, for example, in my case, UK, and determine the location based on IPv4 and IPv6. So we are saying, pick up the location based on the IP address. And we are good for that. And then we say United Kingdom and click on create. Now, if your organization has a different location, in addition to UK, so for example, in France, you can just add that and you can search it over here and click on create. So you get the idea. So if you have your organization working in 5 countries, you can add all those countries. Or if you are across the world, then you can pick it up that way. Or if you want connections only coming from the corporate offices that you have, whether it is the headquarters or the satellite offices around the world, you could list the IP address. So that is where this IP range location comes in. So you click on the IP ranges location, and you can either upload a list of IP addresses, or you can just give it one by one. So you can just say trusted or offices. You could say that. Name doesn't really matter. We are saying mark it as a trusted location, and you click on the plus symbol, and you can keep on going with the IP address. For example, if I have my office public IP as 1.2.3.4, I need to specify it over here, and I need to give it as a CIDR notation, so /32. If you have a range of IP addresses that your company owns, say for example like a /26, /28, whatever, you can predefine those ones over here before we create the conditional access policy. So in our case, we are trying just to limit the access to the organization from one particular country. So in my case, I'll just go with the UK. So once we have the name locations predefined, we can go back into policies and we click on new policy and we name the policy CAP6, block access outside the UK. Now click on all users. Now we can exclude our current user at the moment that we are trying to use, so that in case we are making a mistake with the policy, you can always back out. So that is always a good recommendation. Always exclude at least one account from all conditional access policies, and also create them as report only mode to start with. So we are targeting all the users. We are targeting all the resources. So we say all cloud apps. It doesn't matter which cloud apps you want access to. You should be having a connection coming from within the country. Now, this is just a basic layer of defense. You could always have hackers when they use a VPN into the country, so they can easily get an IP address which is UK-based and initiate the connection from there. So in that case, this conditional access policy wouldn't stop that particular connection. So you get the idea. Networks, this is where we configure. So we are happy to configure yes over here, and we say include any network location, excluding the trusted one. So we say excluding the UK, and we save. And we are kind of going with the reverse logic over here. So what we are saying is we want to block access. So we go into the access control and we say block access instead of grant as to the ones that we have seen so far. And we click on select. So now what we are saying over here with the condition is we are blocking access from all the locations, any network or location, excluding the selected ones or the trusted ones that I have. So in this case, I'm selecting UK. You can always select your office locations, the IP ranges. So we are blocking access in this particular conditional access policy, but then we are excluding our own predefined network locations. Again, report-only mode to start with. We are excluding the current user. That's fine. Click on Create. So we have created the 6th policy. We have 4 more to go. The next one is all about blocking access based on the device type. So what we are defining over here is we don't want connections coming in from certain device types to our tenant. So for example, we don't want to have connections coming from a Linux machine or from a Mac machine or from a Windows phone. Those are the ones that our user base are not used to, and we don't want to support that. So if that is the case, let's create a policy for that. Click on New Policy, and we say CAP7, block non-approved devices, something along those lines. We are targeting all the users. It doesn't matter who it is. We are targeting all the resources. Network, it doesn't matter. We are targeting from anywhere. And we are clicking on device platforms. We are configuring device platforms. And we are saying we don't want Windows Phone. Select the device platform. We don't want Windows Phone, Mac or Linux. Or if you do have Mac users, then you can uncheck that. You can keep the Android and iOS because most of the organizations will have some form of mobile devices based on those platforms. So let's select these 3 ones. You can again tweak based on your requirements. Click on Done. And in the access controls, we say block access. Click on Select. Report-only mode to start with, excluding the current user, and we click on Create. So that's number 7. Number 8 is about, again, multi-factor authentication, copying for all the users. And we are saying that whenever a user wants to join a machine to Entra ID, we want MFA to be triggered. So we don't want anyone with just a username password combination to be able to join a machine into our tenant. We want an MFA on top of it. So for that, again, let's click on New Policy. Let's give it a name, CAP8, for example. And we say require MFA to join Entra ID. And we're targeting all the users. We're targeting a user action. So we're not going with cloud apps over here. We are saying user action from the drop down, and we say register or join a device. And in order to do that, we're going straight back into the access, and we are happy to grant access, but we need multi-factor authentication for that particular action to be successful. So click on Select, report-only mode again, click on Create, and the policy is done. Now we have 2 more policies to go. Number 9 is all about disabling persistent browser sessions. So what we are saying over here is we don't want users to have persistent sessions within their browser, even if they close and reopen it. We don't want that session to be longer. So we just want to terminate the sessions, or don't want to persist the sessions throughout, so that we are constantly asking the users to re-authenticate with the platform. So let's go ahead with that. So we say click on New Policy, CAP number 9, CAP9. Let's just go ahead and do it in caps, CAP9. Disable, I can't type, persistent browser sessions. Now, whenever you create a policy, it is always best to name it correctly so that the next time someone has a look at it, they kind of know as to what that particular policy is all about without going through the policy and trying to figure out all the conditions that you have put in place. So let's click on all users. We are targeting all the accounts. And in conditions, we're going with client application. And we are saying browser. And we are going for the sessions option over here. So we haven't touched that option yet. So we click on sessions for disabling the persistent browser sessions. And over here, we have a few options, and we go with the persistent browser session selected. And we say never persist. So we don't want the browser sessions to be persistent. So we click on select, report-only mode, and you can click create. This one you can straight away go ahead and turn it on, because it's not going to affect anyone drastically. All we are saying is we don't want the sessions to be persisting longer, kind of forever. So click on create, and the policy is there. The last one is about blocking the guest access, or kind of tailoring the guest access only to the relevant platforms. So for example, the guest access normally is for maybe SharePoint Online, the profile information, and Office 365 in general. So we don't want the guest access to have any kind of sessions going on with any other platforms. So for example, let's click on new policy to create that. And let's just say CAP10 guest access restrictions. Now you can tweak it based on the behavior that you have within your organization for the guest. But here I'm saying include selected users and groups, and we are saying guest, and I'm just going ahead and selecting all of them. And target resources, we select all the cloud apps and we exclude, and we say excluded applications over here. So this is where we want to define where the guest access should have access. So I'm saying maybe SharePoint, for example. Let's just wait for the picker to load. Office 365. Office 365 SharePoint, Office 365, for example. Maybe let's click on select. Now you can tweak it based on the behavior that you want within your organization. Networks, we don't really mind whether they come from a trusted or a non-trusted. Conditions, we don't have anything to configure over here for the guest access, and we are saying grant block access over here. So we are blocking access to all cloud applications, excluding the ones that we are specifying over here, and we are targeting the users to be just the guest users. So again, report only mode, and click on create. So let's click on refresh, and we should all the policies there. So CAP10 is over here. So 1 to 10. All these policies are created by us. Most of them are in report only mode. You can evaluate the impact of that by going into the sign-in logs and trying to figure out as to whether it is going to have a drastic impact or not. If everything is good, you can slowly turn it on one by one. You can also have a small set of users being targeted for each of the policies. So you could go into one of the options that we have, maybe say block legacy authentication, for example. Instead of targeting all the users, maybe you can select a group and you can just pick a small group that you currently have within your organization, or just select a couple of user accounts, see how the experience is, and if everything is good, you can come back and turn it to all groups and all users. So let's just go back, click on OK. I don't want to make any changes. Now, when we started, I did mention that these tagged ones, the Microsoft managed ones, are over here. So let me show you as to how we can create a few basic Microsoft managed or Microsoft tagged conditional access policies within our portal or within our tenant. So for this one, we have to go into our admin center. So we go into admin.microsoft.com. So this is the admin portal. And if you click on setup, wait for it to load. I'm already in setup. Okay, fine. So here we have an option that says configure multi-factor authentication. Let me just go back real quick. That was a bit too fast. So configure multi-factor authentication. So if you click on that one, wait for the page to load. Normally you will have a get started option over here, and you can just go through the wizard in which you can enable the policies, you can put the exclusions in place, and you can also select which type of MFA options are enabled or are approved within your organization. So it's always recommended to have the Microsoft Authenticator one as an MFA and any 502 keys. We shouldn't be having any calls or SMS as a form of multi-factor authentication, as they are not that secure. So if I click on manage over here, you'll be able to just manage the policies. But once you go through the setup for the first time, you will be able to create the policies. So it will show you a list of all the policies like this. You can put in exclusions. You can exclude certain users and groups. And then you can go through the wizard and create the policy. And it dumps all the policies in one go, and it is all turned on. And it's a straightforward process of creating a few basic 3 or 4 conditional access policies just to keep things going from, say, for example, day one. And then you can go ahead and create your own custom policies. Now, once you go through the wizard and create the policies, then you can't delete them. That's the kind of a drawback of that. So if you go into one of the policies that we have over here, which has a tag called Microsoft Managed, we don't have an option to delete from the portal. So in that case, you don't have to go ahead and create those policies as part of your custom policy list. So you can exclude the ones that are over here. So that is how we can create conditional access policies for identity-based Entra ID platform. I will create a new video for the Intune-based ones. If you have any questions, please do ask them in the comment section, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. I do produce videos on a daily basis around Microsoft 365, Intune, and Azure. So if those topics are of any interest to you, please do consider subscribing to the channel, because that gives us a big boost in producing more videos. It gives me a signal that there are audience for the videos that I make, and it is something nice to have, of course. Thank you.